Welcome to Bravehearts, the podcast dedicated to honoring heroes, both human and animal, personal heroes, national heroes, and unknown heroes. These courageous souls risk their lives so others can live, and it's our mission to give them the recognition and respect they truly deserve. These are the stories we want to tell. Stay tuned and be inspired.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Bravehearts.
I'm excited.
I've been waiting all week to hear this story that Elizabeth is going to grace us with.
I've been waiting to tell you guys this story for like 3 weeks. I started researching it, like 2.5 weeks ago. So I'm excited to share it. But before we jump into it, I want to tell you 3 facts about where we're going to be today.
Ooh.
And do you have any guesses about where we're at, Michelle? Do you remember?
I kind of remember, but I'm going to let you do the 3, I'm going to let you try to give the hints and see if I can get it.
Okay. So where we're going, the world's oldest form of writing, called cuneiform, was discovered here, and it even predates ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Well, so that takes out Egypt.
That's true. Okay, the next one is the historic Silk Road, the ancient trade route connecting China with Europe and the Middle East, passed through here.
See, for some reason, my first thoughts were Ukraine or Iran.
Iran, that's a good one. That's a good guess. Ukraine is a good guess too, but Ukraine, no, it's not Ukraine.
Yeah, because I was like, those don't go with the second hint. So I'm like,
you don't think Iran goes with that second hint?
Oh no, it does, but
okay.
Ukraine doesn't. Yeah, I was like, Ukraine's way not by China, so.
True.
Okay, but did you say 3 hints?
The last one is the national animal is a goat.
Okay, and I said Iraq?
You said Iran.
Oh, okay, so
Iraq. Is correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Iraq
there you go.
Correct. So we're going to be in Iraq for this story, and we're going to be talking about the Baghdad Zoo and how it was impacted during the Iraq War.
Yeah, because, I mean, the animals are impacted too.
Yeah, I mean,
what
I didn't really think about it. Yeah. Well, we'll get into a lot of that. But first, our story begins with a man named Lawrence Anthony. Lawrence Anthony was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and he initially began working in insurance and real estate, but quickly learned that the African bush was where his heart belonged. He purchased the Tula Tula Game Reserve and began his career as a conservationist. Anthony became known as the Elephant Whisperer because of his ability to communicate with the matriarch of the herd of wild elephants at risk of being exterminated because they had escaped their enclosure and were wreaking havoc on local communities. Anthony was able to successfully rescue the 9 elephants and bring them to the Tula Tula reservation. And it was one night when this herd of elephants visited Anthony and his girlfriend, Francois, that he realized that animals 10,290.7 kilometers away, or 6,394.34 miles away, were suffering a terrible fate. The animals at the Baghdad Zoo were suffering at the hands of human conflict as the Iraqi war had just begun. So we're in March of 2003, for those of you who were not old enough to remember when the Iraq war began. I was
youngin'.
I was 3. So
yeah, so you're like, don't quite remember that.
Yeah. And for those of you who maybe weren't familiar or didn't pay attention to the goings on during the Iraq War, we're going to give a little bit of background. The Iraq War began because of a justified claim that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, which threatened international peace, as well as Saddam Hussein's regime supported terrorism, and that threatened the global war on terror. So the coalition led by the United States and partnered or in conjunction with the United Kingdom and Poland and Australia. So Anthony had just watched clips recently of the U.S.-led invasion of Baghdad. The coalition tanks and other ground troops advanced into the city, pulling down statues of Saddam Hussein, strategic airstrikes hitting targets, resulting in large explosions. And all of this was shown on television, and when Anthony saw it, he could not help but think about Marjan, a lion in Afghanistan who had been in the zoo at the Kabul Zoo in Afghanistan, whose story was shared around the world. The lion suffered severely at the hands of human conflict, and this came to light after the fall of the Taliban. Marjan had attacked and killed a man who had entered his cage, and then this man's brother threw a hand grenade into the cage, leaving Marjan severely injured and blind in an
Oh,
eye.
jeez.
Yeah.
And
So
was there a reason he was in the cage with there, or was he just messing around and went in there?
I don't remember exactly if there was a reason. I want to say in the book that I read that he was drunk
Mm.
and he had gone in there, started messing around with the lion. The lion killed him, and then his brother decided to throw a grenade in to kind of get revenge at the lion. This lion's face was publicized around the world, and people began to really see the devastation that human conflict has on animals. And Anthony automatically began thinking about the Baghdad Zoo as a result of this and what terrible things these animals must be suffering. So, in that moment, Anthony decided that he was going to do all that he could to help the wonderful animals at the Baghdad Zoo who were depending on humans to take care of them. Little did Anthony know that he would have to talk to exactly the right people to allow him, a civilian, to enter into a war zone.
Yeah.
What would you think if you felt this sudden urge to go into a war zone to do something as a civilian? How would you be feeling?
I'd probably be really intimidated because, I feel like I could like defend myself pretty good, but still, like that's different than going into an actual like war zone. So
Yeah.
I would be feeling very intimidated. Like, what? How am I going to do this? How am I going to keep myself safe? How am I going to keep the people with me safe? How am I going to get the animals out safe? It would just be, I'd
Yeah.
be going into problem solving mode.
Yeah, lots of problems to solve, not only for the animal safety, but also for your safety. And Anthony experiences a lot of potential dangers because he is white, and a lot of the Iraqi people assume that he's American, but he's actually South African, so he's not a member of any of the coalition forces, and that causes a lot of potential tension for him in areas that he may be vulnerable, because one of his common concerns is that he's a Westerner and he's in the Middle East and there's this big war going on, taking down Saddam Hussein's regime, and he's worried about his life.
Yeah. Because even though, I mean, he's not, you don't know what side, not that that matters, but it's like, he's like, I just want to go in there to help the animals.
Yeah,
Like,
he's just going in there for humanitarian work, not to
right.
pick any sides or to support any other sides, purely for humanitarian support. Well, it took Anthony several days and multiple conversations with many different people in various positions around the world to be able to have authorization to enter into Afghanistan. He got these official papers from the Kuwaiti government, and they stated that he was on a humanitarian mission for the Baghdad Zoo. The next morning, Anthony was joined by 2 Kuwaiti Zoo staff members to travel to Iraq to cross the border. And once they crossed the border from Kuwait into Iraq, Anthony tried to lay low in the vehicle, squishing himself down between the seats so that people wouldn't recognize a Westerner in the back of the vehicle. So they would be less likely to be stopped.
When he came in, was it like on a military plane or was it like on a commercial plane? How did he get in
To Iraq?
Yeah.
So he drove across the Kuwait border.
Oh, that's right. You just said that. Okay, so he drove across just like in like a normal vehicle then?
Yeah, in a rental.
Okay.
So he flew from South Africa to Kuwait, and then in Kuwait he got his papers, and then they rented a car, and they didn't tell them that they were going into Iraq with the rental car, but
Yeah.
they took it into Iraq.
Yeah. And how did it say how many people are with him?
Yeah, so it's just him and 2 other Middle Easterners. They're both from Kuwait. Kuwait Zoo volunteered 2 staff to go with him and help him. They also gave him... So go ahead.
I was going to say, because you said they were there, but I'm like, how many people does he have with him? But only 2 that's a lot. Not a lot of people for a lot of things to do.
Yeah, there's a lot that they're going to have to do once they get to the zoo. And there's a lot that they might have to face on their way to the zoo. So a lot of potential problems that could arise. But miraculously, they arrived safely in Baghdad without any problems from any potential Hussein loyalists that might have recognized him in the vehicle. Once they were in Baghdad, they were escorted to the zoo to assess the current state. Anthony was prepared for the worst, but his imagination could not prepare him for what he saw. There was extensive damage. The parks surrounding the zoo had been bombed relentlessly. Husham Hussein, deputy director of the zoo, showed Anthony and the two Kuwaiti friends around the zoo. Hussein walked them from the front gates, which had been blasted open and now hung at obscure angles. However, once inside the zoo, the true destruction was revealed. The animals were living in filthy conditions, urine and stool dried in the desert sun, attracting flies and other insects. Many animals had already died due to lack of food and water, and their carcasses had been tossed into cages to feed the few animals that were still alive. The lion's enclosure had a hole blown into the wall, which looked to have been poorly patched by some soldiers. Anthony knew that the moment the lions had their strength back, that patchwork would not hold them, and made a note to fix that as soon as possible. Prior to the start of the war, the Baghdad Zoo had been home to around 650 animals, and now, a mere 8 days since the invasion of the city of Baghdad, there were only 35 animals left in the zoo.
Holy crap. And was that all from them being killed, or were they able to get animals out before?
So they did not evacuate any animals.
Oh,
no animals were evacuated from the zoo. What actually ended up happening was, of these 650 animals, most of them were taken by looters.
Oh.
Yeah, so the city of Baghdad was essentially in anarchy. There was no government, there was no order, and as a result, the way that Saddam Hussein's regime worked was essentially through government reliance. And because that government regime was taken down, the people no longer had what they were relying on to provide for their needs. So they didn't have the money they needed for food. They didn't have food. They didn't have clean water. They didn't have electricity. So these looters turned to things like the zoo to get their food, which is unfortunate, but also I can understand that their lives and their family lives came first.
Right, especially if there's like pigs or, bison or animals that are like, oh, well, people actually eat these animals all the time. So
yeah. And in part of the book that I read, which I haven't mentioned yet, the book that I read for this episode is called Babylon's Ark. It's by Lawrence Anthony, the man who I'm talking about. But in that book, he mentions that there was a point where he saw looters who were hiding in the water, and they were catching waterfowl to take home so that they could have something to eat, so that their families would have a meal. Yeah. I cannot imagine the anarchy and the amount of survival that these people had to go through during this time. And unfortunately, a lot of these wonderful animals who were not indigenous to the area suffered at those hands. Some of those animals, well, of the 35 animals that were left, there were lions, Bengal tigers, several types of monkeys, baboons, a couple Iraqi brown bears, some lynxes, a desert fox, and several dogs.
I was gonna say, I'm sure the predators were the ones that they're like, I think we'll leave those ones.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. And there was actually a point where, as I mentioned, the lion's enclosure has a huge hole in it because of a bombshell. And the lions got out as a result of that hole. And the soldiers had to kill 3 lions because they couldn't get them back in their enclosure. So, but the lions were the ones that people avoided because they didn't want to be eaten.
Yeah.
I can't blame
those
them.
Would be the last animals I would choose to go hunt in a zoo.
Right? Exactly. So, as I mentioned, this zoo has been ransacked, not only for animals, but for every single piece of equipment in the zoo. So, buckets for water for the animals are gone. Copper wire from street lamps have been pulled out so that Street lamps are knocked over and wire has been pulled out of. Anything that might have had worth was taken so that these people who are experiencing terrible economic conditions at the moment can try to survive.
Yeah, and then I'm sure all the food for the animals is already gone too.
Yeah, that's why they were throwing carcasses into their enclosures.
Yeah.
On the day that the war began, the zoo received 2 new members, 2 giraffes. And they didn't even make it to their enclosures before they were taken by looters. One of them was killed and eaten, and the other was probably waiting to be sold somewhere on the black market. But the immediate problem that Anthony recognized, aside from the hole in the lion's enclosure, was the severe dehydration that all the animals were experiencing, as well as the starvation. Soldiers had tried to hobble a few buckets of water to these animals, but it was a very difficult job and it was very time demanding. Other
Yeah.
soldiers had given some of the animals their surplus of MREs, which are meals ready to eat, which are meals designed to provide soldiers with the nutrients that they need when standard food service is not available. So some of these soldiers had fed these animals with their surplus of MREs, and Husham, the zoo's director, explained that when he arrived back at the zoo several days after the war began, that he knew that the animals immediately needed water because they were struggling to survive in the 100-degree temperatures, and it wasn't even summer at this point. So Husham and a couple of the other zookeepers spent their entire day carrying a single bucket back and forth from the lake that was near the zoo to the animals' enclosures.
Jeez. And just one bucket.
Just one bucket for all these animals they had to water. And the reason they were using a bucket was because the pumps that had been operating prior to the war were no longer functioning because looters had come and taken the parts.
And they're probably lucky they were even able to find a bucket. Like, if everyone was taking everything.
Yeah, no, honestly. Actually, Anthony talks a little bit more about that in his book. He mentions that he got some buckets and within a matter of hours they were taken.
Jeez.
So the zoo is in horrific condition. And I don't believe we can truly understand what this emaciated zoo really looked like. And there's some pictures that I'll try to post on Instagram if I can find ones that are accurate. But the zoo was in pure destruction.
Yeah, I can't
Maybe not,
imagine.
yeah, maybe not bombed to the point of it being unrecognizable, but these animals are suffering so severely at the hands of people that Anthony mentions at times he felt like they were hopeless and that it would be better just to put them all out of their misery.
Yeah.
But Anthony told Hasham that anyone who would come back to work would be paid in American dollars because they needed help to bring water and food to these animals and anything else they could possibly get help with. So Hasham understood and told Anthony that he would see what he could do and he could see who would come with him as long as it was safe. The difficult thing about getting people to the zoo, specifically employees getting to the zoo, is that many people have to travel all the way to the north end of the zoo to come through the entrance because the other more south entrance is part of the red zone. And
Oh.
yeah, so a lot of the people have to travel all the way up and around the zoo to come down into the zoo. And the north entrance is where the gates are blown open. So that's how looters can keep getting into the zoo too.
Right. Yeah, because there's that one way in.
But if they attempted to come through the other entrance farther south, they risked being shot. At one point in conversation, Anthony was going to walk off a paved pathway with Hisham, but Hisham stopped him and said bombs. And it was in that moment that Anthony looked around and realized all the unexploded bombs that littered the ground that were on the pathway.
Oh, man.
Yeah. The Americans had tried to pick up what they could, but there were still several unexploded ordnances that were just out.
And that would make it even more like, because who knows when those could go off.
Yeah. Yeah, the slightest thing could possibly set them off.
Just add another thing that could go wrong.
Yeah, definitely. While Anthony was in Baghdad, he stayed at the Al Rashid Hotel, which became the United States base in Baghdad during the war. But previously, the hotel had been a place where Hussein had entertained diplomats and had been a place where much of the official regime business took place. There were even underground rooms honeycombed beneath the hotel for different meetings that the regime would have. And there was also rumored that there was tunnels. So one of the concerns for the American soldiers was that if there were tunnels, then Hussein loyalists could come into the hotel and make it an internal attack on the US forces.
Yeah, especially if they know where the tunnels are and the Americans didn't, then
Yeah, how terrifying would
that's a
that be?
problem.
Anthony was able to get a decent room in the hotel. I'm not going to be able to share all the details about his experience, but his first night and every night preceding, he mentioned that nightly firefights would erupt throughout and wake him. He said he never woke up wondering where he was because he knew exactly where he was in a war zone. And
Dang.
every morning, his alarm was the sounds of tanks starting for the early morning patrol. He described the sound as a terrifying commotion that sounded like a squad of jumbo jets had flown through his hotel room, and said that it was disorienting as a panic attack.
Jeez.
So every morning, these incredibly loud tanks would rumble to life at 6 a.m., and that was Anthony's reminder that it was time to start another day.
Man.
Yeah.
That would be not the best thing to wake up to, like your alarm is tanks and war. Jeez.
So that's just his first day in Baghdad. So his first day in Baghdad, he gets there, he meets Hisham, who's the deputy director of the zoo, and he tours them around, and they see all the mass devastation that's happening to the animals. And then he goes back to the hotel and he sleeps in his room and is woken up by tanks and is constantly hearing the sounds of firefight in the distance. What a shock that would be.
Yeah. Especially depending on like where he lived before. It's probably like
He lived on a game
completely
reserve.
Yeah, so it's like quiet, not
Yeah.
much going on. He hears the sound of animals and stuff, but then to go from wild to a legitimate active war zone.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that would be like. And I don't think any civilian will ever be able to imagine what that would be like. And I don't think I ever want to be able to know what that's
No.
like.
He's brave to be out there and staying out there.
Yeah, he is. Well, the next day, he was informed by the soldiers that he had to constantly wear his Tula Tula game reserve cap, baseball cap. And if he wasn't wearing it, that he ran the risk of being shot by the soldiers, the American soldiers, because they couldn't guarantee that it was him otherwise.
Jeez.
The soldiers also received a do not shoot order for him if they saw him in his Tula Tula cap, as well as a do not shoot order for the rental car, which had the word zoo duct taped on it on a sign. So that's how their next day started. And along with that, Hisham also brought 5 Iraqis to the zoo the next morning, including himself. So Hisham and 4 workers showed up, and each of the men shared their frustration and angers about the situation surrounding the zoo, and they were determined to rescue the animals. And Anthony pledged them to get American assistance, even though he was not an American. And every morning, Anthony made a daily ritual of walking around to each animal and talking to them in a soothing, quiet voice until he got some form of recognition from the animal. He would speak to them and tell them it's going to be okay, we're going to take care of you. And he would do this until they either looked at him or gave him some form of recognition to try to help him feel like they kind of had a connection.
Yeah.
In his book, he talked about how the power of consistent care and a positive mind frame even impacts wild animals. We talk a lot about that with pets. The power of consistent care and a positivity around an animal impacts them, but it's true even with wild animals.
Yeah. Especially animals that are used to being taken care of, because they're still wild animals even though they're in the zoo, but they're used to having a caretaker, or at least Someone to bring them food, someone to bring them water, enrichment, all that type of stuff.
And so that was his ritual every morning. He would walk around to each of the animals and talk to them until they gave him some form of recognition. But on the second day, after he had made his rounds, he also had some veterinarians who came in to assess the animals. And they were able to determine that none of the animals were on the brink of death. However, they were really concerned about how long they could supply the animals with food and water, because they need food and
Right.
water to survive, even if they are sick. And Anthony was not sure how they were going to provide food and water for these animals, because they had brought a little bit of buffalo meat, and they had brought limited amounts of antibiotics and other medications for animals, but not nearly enough to sustain the animals for an extended period of time. So Anthony decided that he would begin sending people out into town to purchase donkeys to feed the carnivores, because donkeys are very common in Iraq, and these carnivores are already used to eating donkey meat. That's primarily what they ate in the zoo. So he decided that that's what he would do. And they were successful in these efforts. They got several donkeys and were able to feed the tigers and the lions. But every bit of progress that they made in the zoo was hindered by looters. Every time they got a donkey, the next day, the food would be gone. What wasn't already fed to the carnivores was gone.
And if they had no electricity too, that would be kind of hard to like. I guess with animals, it's not as important, I guess, to like keep it cool. So did they? I mean, they couldn't keep it cold.
There is, so forgot to mention, but there is one working freezer in the Al Rashid Hotel.
Oh, okay.
So some of the meat is being kept in the Al Rashid Hotel, but the rest of the meat that is at the zoo is being stolen by looters. Because it's just a small, like, little chest freezer. It's nothing
Yeah.
large.
And they can guess, oh, they're bringing 4 goats inside the zoo. There's going to be meat. So as
Yeah,
soon
there's
as
a
it's
bunch of
nighttime,
donkeys.
I'm going to sneak in. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of these looters would even come in broad daylight. As I mentioned earlier, Anthony describes a time when they had secured buckets from the hotel, actually, from the Al Rashid Hotel, and they went missing within mere hours. It was literally that same afternoon. So they took the buckets and they began giving the animals water. They put them down, came back to them a little bit later, and they were gone. But finally, Anthony had had enough with these looters. He was tired of all these animals suffering at these people's hands. And he knew that he also had to provide for the staff members, because he knew that if they weren't being provided for, they would also be stealing food.
Yeah.
So he made a large effort to secure food for the staff members, and a lot of the soldiers were very instrumental in that. There was actually a couple Department of Defense photographers that were there who gave Anthony bags upon bags of dried goods to give to the zoo staff so that they could be fed and their families could be fed.
That's awesome too, because they're also risking their lives going out and helping. So
Yeah,
for
they
them
are.
to be able to do that and actually get, what's the word? Like a reward for their efforts. Yeah, compensated for what they're doing.
Yeah, and they're being paid. So the food and then being paid is definitely a good compensation and reward for them coming and trying to help these animals.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
it's like paid for their work, but you also deserve a hazard pay. Here's some extra stuff.
Here's some extra
stuff
out
during the war zone.
Definitely. So Anthony and the rest of the team devised a plan to try to deter looters. And the first plan was Anthony secured a firearm from an unnamed soldier, which he would use to aim at looters and yell at them to leave. He never fired the weapon, but it did intimidate them enough to get them to leave generally. They also began punishing some of the looters. At first, they made a cell, which they called the Baghdad Zoo jail, and they would make the looters stay in there for like 2 or 3 days and then let them go. But this really didn't do much, because in this jail cell, people would be fed 3 meals and they would have shelter, they would have clean water. So this was kind of like encouraging the looters to come and get caught because they would get 3 meals a day
Right. They're like,
and get
hey.
water. Yeah. So this didn't really deter them. So they decided to change the punishment, and they decided the new punishment was going to be for the looters to scrub the dried uric crystals and dried feces from the animals' enclosures until it was the cleanest it was going to get.
That is awesome. I mean, it's a win-win. Hopefully they'll stop looting, and if not, then they'll help clean and keep the zoo clean.
Especially when there's only 9, I think. Anthony, the 2 coatis, Ishame, and then the 4 people he brought.
So like eight, 9 maybe people.
8, 9, yeah. So there's
to take care of 35 animals at a zoo.
Yeah, and the pumps still aren't working. So they're bucketing water to the animals pretty much all day. Jeez. Especially because, at least on this first day, not this first day, but on the first day when they were taking buckets of water to the animals, they were so dehydrated that they couldn't get enough.
Right. Yeah, they couldn't keep up with supplying them with water.
Yeah, it was just endless drinking. So for 8 people having to go and clean their enclosures, it's the bottom of the line. The hygiene of the enclosures is the last thing they're worried about as far as the animals' care at this point. But we're going to kind of jump a little bit. It's still part of the story, but I want to ask you, Michelle, have you heard of Uday Hussein?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so Uday Hussein was Sudan's oldest son. And I didn't know anything about Uday either. But apparently he was a very, very violent man. And he was not a man to be messed with. He was monstrous. He abused men and women. And a direct quote from Anthony, he said, Uday was a savage, promiscuous psychopath. He considered himself a lion among men. And so what better pets to keep?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So we're going to jump now to Uday Hussein's palace. Unknown to all the soldiers, when the palace was abandoned, it was not completely abandoned. 3 lions were in an enclosure in the palace, and the Green Berets actually had adopted them as their mascots. They were the ones that found them, and they were so much more bellicose, so like aggressive and confrontational than the other lions at the zoo. So they didn't want to bring these lions over at this point. And the special forces, the Green Berets, they named these lions 3 different names. Xena, there were 2 lionesses and 1 male. Xena, Heather, and Brutus. And Xena was pregnant with some cubs. Since these lions were being well taken care of by the special forces, Anthony and his team decided to leave them there for the time being because they were doing so well. They were healthy, they were fed, they had water. But the next day, another enclosure was discovered at the palace. And Anthony approached the cage and saw that there was a dead lioness in the cage, as well as 2 cubs who appeared to be about 3 months old. And at this point, the smell has smacked him in the face, and it just reeks like death because there's a dead lion in there. And then Anthony also sees a German Shepherd and a Labrador Retriever in there with the cubs. And then Anthony looks around and he sees that there's no other animals, so he enters the cage. And a lot of people don't know this, or at least I didn't know this. In Iraq, dogs are considered unclean, so they're commonly seen in zoos. And they're viewed as like interesting animals to look at because they're unclean.
Yeah, I know like religiously in some religions like that dogs are unclean and they can't be in your house. And, you know, you can't touch them. You can't have them near you and all that different.
Yeah. And I didn't do any research on exactly why, because that would have been another rabbit hole that I dove down. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was religious reasons if there were religious reasons behind that. So Anthony, seeing no other lions in the enclosure, entered into the cage. And the door closes behind him, and after he's about 20 yards into the enclosure, he sees a young male lion stand up in the corner. In the shadows of a tree, there was more movement. Another lion stands up. From the opposite corner, more movement, and 2 more lions begin moving towards him.
how many lions did this guy have?
What do you do in this situation? Like, you're in the
Um,
enclosure, and at this point, there's 4, 5 lions and 2 cubs and 2 dogs.
I would try to slowly walk back out the door.
Yeah, that's what I would try to do. Slowly back up, keep my back away from them, walk
Yeah.
backwards slowly, and try to get out of this
No
enclosure.
sudden movements.
Yeah, and Anthony knew that's what he needed to do. But Anthony's adrenaline kicked in, and he turned around, and despite knowing that he shouldn't run from these predators, he ran out as fast as he could, because he was pretty
Yeah.
confident that he could make it to the gate in time and close it before they got
Right.
to
We
him.
all think we would just, rationally slowly back out, but we all know we would probably be running out that door.
Yeah. But he made it out unharmed, and after seeing these lions, Anthony realized that they really needed to make a rescue attempt for these lions. These animals were in much worse shape than the 3 lions that had been adopted by the special forces. So they decided that this rescue attempt was going to be made, and they acquired a crane and some old transport cages from the zoo and created a plan to get the lions moved from the enclosure into the transport cages. And they only had 2 hours to get these lions moved, we have 5 adult lions, 2 cubs, and 2 dogs they need to move in 2 hours.
And it's crazy that they must be all be friends, that the dogs have been living with these lions, so it's not like the lions are trying to eat the dogs.
They didn't eat them, so Anthony, he hypothesizes that the reason that the animals didn't follow their primal instincts to eat these dogs is because they probably bonded over such traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
Which I can imagine. I would.
Yeah. Or if they're raised together or something, who knows?
Yeah. And these dogs, Anthony mentions in his book that they seemed to be taking care of these cubs and very protective of these cubs. So that was interesting as well. But they only had 2 hours to move these animals. And the reason they only had 2 hours was because this is a war zone, as we've explained. And it was about 2 hours before it would become dark. And they didn't want to be out at dark. They didn't want to be moving the animals at dark, because that's when it became more risky to be out in Baghdad. So these animals were already highly stressed out. These lions are absolutely to their breaking point. They're starving, they're dehydrated, and people left them. And then they've been bombed. And so they're not associating people with good things right now. So after a very difficult time of trying to encourage the male lion to get into the transport cage, they had to take a 30-minute break because the animal was too stressed out. Him and 3 of the female lions were all just too stressed out to be pushed anymore at this point. After the break, Anthony decided that he was the only one to be speaking and everyone else was to be silent. And the only reason he was to speak was to give orders to make sure that these lions could get into the transport cages safely. And this attempt worked much better, and all the lions were able to be safely moved into the transport cages. They were able to just grab the lion cubs and the dogs and put them in a cage. Initially, that's what they did first, was they grabbed the cubs and the dogs and put them into a transport cage. But next to the lions, there was also an emaciated cage of cheetahs. And they were also moved into transport cages and taken to the zoo. Rumor had it that Uday also had other animals at a cottage not too far from the zoo. However, when Anthony arrived, many of the animals were dead, and the only animals alive were 1 baby monkey, 3 ostriches, and several peacocks. The birds were too large to take back to the zoo in the cars, so they planned to come back and walk the birds from the back to the zoo, since it was only a couple miles away from the zoo.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to imagine what this would have looked like if you were a soldier at a checkpoint in Baghdad. In the distance, you're seeing what you think might be a suicide bomber, but it's running really fast. And as it gets closer, you realize it's an ostrich running at you. And there's a man holding the lead of this ostrich running with him. And they're yelling at you, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot." And then another officer comes over and informs you that these ostriches were at Uday's cottage and they're being taken to the zoo by these Kuwaiti Zoo members and by Lawrence Anthony. What would you think as these ostriches are running past you?
At first I'd be like, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? Like, am I hallucinating? Is that an ostrich? I would be very confused.
Yeah, I would be too. So these animals get safely to the zoo, and unfortunately, the looters strike again. And the baby monkey and the peacocks were stolen, and most likely were eaten.
Yeah. I was going to say, especially the peacocks, I'm sure were.
Yeah, they were most likely eaten. So sad.
Sad.
Yeah. But many other animals were saved in this project. I could have made this a 2-part story, and I really thought about it, but I was like, we just did a 2-parter.
Yeah.
Like, I should probably not. But there are many other animals saved in this project. Then he traveled throughout the later phase of this mission to help raise money to support the animals. So he traveled to the United States, to Europe, so that he could help encourage people to support their efforts. But among the other animals that were rescued were 2 Iraqi brown bears, a camel, and 17 of Saddam Hussein's Arabian horses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In the end, the project was sustained by generous donations and by the Iraqi people who decided to make a stand against the harm that humanity was causing. Anthony used what happened at the Baghdad Zoo as an example of the terrible way people are treating the earth. It was his way of drawing a line and saying no further. Anthony used this tragedy to speak about the responsibility that humanity has to care for our planet. In 2004, Anthony founded the Earth Organization, now called the Lawrence Anthony Earth Organization in memory of Lawrence Anthony. The organization's motto, "None survive alone," clearly states their mission to create a better world for all living things. The organization does this through educating people around the world on how they can help preserve the environment and by being actively engaged in rescue and preservation of at-risk wildlife. Let us take a leaf out of Anthony's book and recognize that where there is power, there is also responsibility.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
So this is my favorite conservationist as of right now.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, just to follow through with the thought, like, you get that inspiration or that thought, like, I need to help out. And he might not have known really what was going on or anything. To have that thought, I need to go and help out what's happening there. Get to the zoo, stay out there during all of this, and then continue to raise funds to help. It's like amazing.
Yeah, it really is. As you mentioned, he probably didn't really know what was going on until he got there. And you kind of see that a little bit more if you read the book. But just the sheer amount of effort that he put into this project, even though he had a fiance and a game reservation of his own back in South Africa, he knew that it was important that us as people, humanity, understood the impacts that our actions were having on these animals in Baghdad.
Yeah. And I like, because he was already helping with conservation efforts, having a game reserve there. But it kind of just shows, like, it's a worldwide effort. Like, he was helping out in Africa, but he went and helped somebody else. It doesn't matter where they are in the world, what's happening. Like, it's our responsibility as people living on this earth to help all the animals that live on this earth. Like,
yeah. We're supposed to be stewards.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, like, with great power comes great responsibility. If we have the power, then we are also being held responsible for that power. Anthony even discusses this in his book. We're a vulnerable species just as any of these other animals are. If we lost our resources, we would go extinct just like some of these animals are.
Yeah. I mean, and the people there, they lost all their resources and had to fight and steal and loot to be able to survive.
Yeah, they did. And so it's not only, I think this story is a great example of not only how we impact animals, but how we also impact one another. I know people won't always get along, but we also need to be aware that our actions and our interactions with one another impact each other greatly.
It's true. Dang. That was... I want to read the book now.
It's really good.
All
I highly recommend
that went
it.
down.
Yeah. So again, the book is called Babylon's Ark, and it's written by Lawrence Anthony. I think it has a subtitle. Let me look really quick.
Subtitles?
No, like a subtitle, like two titles.
Oh, I thought you said
Babylon's
it had subtitles.
Ark. No, you're like, it's a book, Elizabeth.
It's a book, isn't it? Like, technically, isn't it all subtitles?
Yeah, technically. Okay, so it's called Babylon's Ark, The Incredible Wartime Rescue of the Baghdad Zoo.
Dang.
Really good.
Yeah, look it up, people.
Yes, please do. But we've got some questions and some fun little things. So, you want to start, Michelle?
Okay, sure. So first, all right, I'm going to do this one first. So I'm going to have you rank these animals 1 through 5.
Okay.
But you don't know what animal's coming next, right?
That's so scary.
Right? So
So
rank the
one is
animals.
the highest?
1 is the easiest.
Oh, easy.
5 is the hardest. Because the question is rank the animals that you think you could get into a cage. So I was like,
Oh,
when you were like
wow.
saying about the like getting the lions into the cage, I'm like, wow, this is gonna fit great.
You're like, I didn't even know.
Right? So 1's the easiest that you think that you could get an animal into a cage from its enclosure, and 5
It's the hardest.
hardest. Yeah.
Okay.
Me
by myself?
Yes, but they're in their enclosure. Okay, so like at least they're not like they can just fly away or.
Well, yeah, I'm not gonna chase
They're in
a
an
wild
enclosure.
animal.
Yeah.
Okay, a vulture is the first one.
Yes.
I want to say like a 2. I'm gonna give that one a 2.
All right. What about an African wild dog?
Oh, shoot.
But just one, not a whole pack. Just one.
A 3. Give that one a 3.
All right. What about a porcupine? A porcupine.
Porcupine. I'm gonna give that one. I should have given the vulture a 1. I'm scared you're gonna do like a tiger, and I'm gonna be like, and then I'm gonna have to put it as my number 1. I'm gonna put porcupine as number 1 then. I have 4 and 5 left.
I mean, I think that a porcupine would be fairly easy.
Yeah.
Get a couple fruit, just lure it. Spider monkey. You have 4 and 5 left.
4.
All right. And a Galapagos tortoise.
Oh my gosh, that thing's never moving.
You're like trying to push it.
Looks like that one's my number 5.
Hey, well, that's pretty, I mean, not
That's
bad,
not too
not
bad.
bad.
Yeah. I was scared that you were gonna do like saltwater crocodile. Like,
See, I was like, nah, I did the African wild dog. We'll do some variety.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, so if I knew what they were before, I probably would put the African wild dog as the hardest.
Yeah. I think a spider monkey would be pretty hard too, because they can like climb
Yeah.
trees and
Spider monkey and or an African wild dog.
yeah.
Okay, well, I have one that you need to guess. Do you want me to
All
give you
right.
some options to guess from, or do you want me to just tell you what the question is and you have to guess it?
Give me the question and I'll try to guess it.
Okay. The world's largest zoo is located where?
London.
Ooh, that's a good guess. Actually, the world's largest zoo is located here in the United States.
Is it San Diego?
No, it is not San Diego. San Diego is 1,800 acres. And this zoo that is the largest is called the Wilds in Ohio. And it's a safari park and conservation center that spans 10,000 acres, making it the largest in terms of land area.
We need to go to Ohio.
I know, right?
Dang. See, I was going to guess either San Diego or in another country. I would not have guessed Ohio. Like, that would
I would
be
have
the last
guessed
state.
San Diego.
Yeah.
Ohio. Yeah, no, I didn't know that Ohio had a big zoo.
That's really cool.
The more you know.
The more you know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm going to have you name one animal that you've always wanted to see in the zoo that you've never seen, and then one animal that you've always wanted to see in the wild that you haven't seen before.
Trying to think of what kind of animals I haven't seen in a zoo. Because I've been to a few zoos. I've been to the San Diego Zoo. and the Holgol Zoo and the Idaho Falls Zoo. And I don't think any of them have a saltwater crocodile.
See, that's what
don't
I
know
was
though.
thinking as an animal because I was like, they're huge. Like, it's not just like the little alligators, but I don't think I'd want to see a saltwater crocodile in the wild.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see
I'd
one.
much rather see it in a zoo.
But I think an animal that I would like to see in the wild is an African elephant.
That would be amazing.
I've seen Asian elephants kind of in the wild.
Yeah, I would count because it's like a reserve, like out,
Yeah.
not in like a typical zoo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say African elephant.
That's awesome.
What about you?
Either an African wild dog or a giraffe, but I want to see the giraffe running. I think the way they run is so awesome.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
All right. Did you have another question or I have one more?
I have one more for you.
All right, sweet.
What do you think should be our biggest concern as people with animals during times of war?
See, I don't say most of, if at all possible, to relocate them. To just get them out of the situation. Because the stress that they would go under with the noise, the lack of food, the disruption, could have lasting effects on them. So, like, totally just remove them from that. But other than that, it'd be just like the typical food and water. And try to get them in a quiet place or away as possible. But
yeah, I agree. I think that is the most effective thing that we could do as people is to remove them from the situation. I know that we can't necessarily, or at least that we personally cannot move these animals, or we personally cannot prevent wars from happening. But I think we do have a responsibility to those animals to do that for them.
yeah. All right, for your last one, you're going to tell me a number of how many animals who are from Africa that you think you can list in 30 seconds.
Okay. I'm going to tell you how many I can think of, or you want me to name them all?
Well, I'm going to have you guess what number you think you can do, and then we're going to have you do it, and we'll count and see how close you can get.
Okay, I think I could do 10.
Just 10?
Well, I'm playing it safe.
Okay. All right. So I'll tell you when,
okay,
and then
12.
12. Okay, and then I'll try to count them for you.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, go.
African elephant, hippo, rhino, lion. I almost said tiger. African painted dog, Nile crocodile, zebra, water buffalo, gazelle. Is it a gazelle or is it an antelope?
I think it's a gazelle. I think they have types of antelope and gazelle.
There's the nadir. Is that one in Africa? Nadir.
You got 10.
Oh, dang it! I should have said 10.
You were better with 10. It's probably harder under pressure to list them.
Yeah, well, and I was also like,
then,
what animals are in Africa? I was like, did
right?
I get
You're
all
like,
the
wait,
big
is that
five?
one
I don't
from
remember.
Africa? Yeah.
I said
very good.
Tiger.
Oh. Aren't there jaguars?
Probably, yeah. Some sort of panther, maybe, I don't know. Leopards, cheetahs. I could have said cheetahs.
Oh, cheetahs, yeah. All right, and we also are gonna start a new game, if you will. And it's gonna be guess the sound. And so we're gonna have you guess the sound, and it will be something. Do we give them a hint as to the subject?
I mean, it's related to this episode.
Yeah, so that's gonna be related to this episode.
Yeah, we'll do them related to the episode that they're on.
Right. And you can guess and put your guess on Instagram. Yeah. And we'll have a special shout out for whoever could be the first person to get the correct answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you think you know what that sound is, comment on Instagram and write what you think it is.
Yeah, comment on the post for this week's episode And then we will share who gets the right answer. If any of you do. If not, we'll reveal it in our next week's episode, or are we going to reveal it in Instagram?
We'll reveal it in our next episode.
Okay, sounds good. Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, that's it, everyone. Don't forget to follow us and rate us on wherever you listen to your podcasts. And follow us on Instagram at BraveHeartsPod. And if you have any story suggestions or anything you want to share with us, email us at...
Thank you for listening.
Yep. We'll see you next week.
Tell your friends and family. Yep.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.